speaker. He finished his Bachelor of Arts in English at Western Mindanao State University, finished his professional education certificate at Zamboanga City State Polytechnic College, finished his Master of Arts English Language Studies at Western Mindanao State University, and currently taking up his PhD Language Studies at Ateneo de Zamboanga University, and a currently college instructor at Zamboanga State College of Marine Sciences and Technology, the English Department Chair at Zamboanga State College of Marine Sciences and Technology, the General Education Coordinator at Zamboanga State College of Marine Sciences and Technology, the Internal Quality Auditor at Zamboanga State College of Marine Sciences and Technology, and the former Target Language Expert Reviewer at National Language Center at University of Maryland, USA, partner. And
Bigatin.
yes, and he received an award, Outstanding Graduate Paper or OGPA by the Linguistic Society of the Philippines 2020, partner. And of course, he also received the third Best Paper Award, wow, by the Lasallian Institute for Development and Educational Research 2019. And the top 10 Outstanding Graduate Paper Award, wow, by the Linguistic Society of the Philippines 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our first presenter who will present the effective written communication, Mr. Jeffy Lloyd De Castro. Sir, good morning.
Yes, sir. Buenos
Hello,
dias
good.
contigo.
Yes, buenos dias con ustedes todo. Thank you so much. And first, I would like to apologize if I won't be able to switch on my camera because it's brown out in our place in Tetuan, and I did not expect this. No, I'm just using my mobile data, and I hope I'm getting sufficient or the right signal, no, for this webinar. And I also wish to switch on my camera later when the electricity comes back. Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to share effective written communication in this webinar. This is such an honor to be invited in this event. So without further ado, I'd like to share my screen to you. And I hope it's already visible on your screen. So I was, do you hear me?
Si, sir. Pwede kami uwi. Medyo
Si.
putol-putol lang.
Pwede lang
Pero
un poco.
pwede yata, men. Yes. So, partner, kasi nagat sa sitwasyon, no? Si live kita. Pati akin na Zamboanga, it's
Okay, so I'm
unpredictable.
so
Yes, partner.
Kuryente.
Si, pwede. Talyata.
I think signal hindi ka bien strong. I'm just using my mobile data kasi may I kuha na lang, no?
Ay,
Okay.
Pwede lang kayo man.
sir, can we suggest?
Man present ustedes mio presentation. I think I sent to Sir Lim.
Yes,
And
sir.
I will
Yes,
be
sir.
using my phone directly.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is our suggestion, supposedly.
Kami
Ka-
alam
ah,
man present, del audio alam to sa sir.
Correct.
Ayan.
Okay, sige. We got your back, Sir Jeffy Lloyd.
Ayan.
Okay, sir. Nakikita nyo na ba, sir, ang slide natin, sir? Partner, that's the reality of our situation in Zamboanga City. And I hope our participants talaga, they will really understand
Naansi na
It really
gayansi.
happens pag live ang show, no?
Taper-deper datong signal. Chinepes
Correct.
nan brown out. Sana naman hindi ara, no?
Yes. That's my fear pag weekend, Samzelco is striking again.
Okay, so I'm back.
Okay.
I'm just using my phone now to speak. No, I disconnected already my laptop. So thank you so much for presenting that. So once again, my name
Welcome.
is Jeffrey Lloyd Del De Castro, and I will be sharing to you effective business writing. Okay, there are so many things that I'd like to share, but I will limit my discussion to the most important information that you can get, no, for you to apply. So, sige, next slide, sir. So, before we go to the main discussion, I'd like to share some factual information regarding business writing. By the way, when we say business writing, it is a type of communication used in a professional setting. Okay, so meaning there is a particular discourse community in that setting. And the community there may be referred to the professional. And when I say professional, that includes even the low rank employees. Okay, so we always remember that when we mean by professional setting, we don't just include those people in the high rank positions, but also those in the lowest, even the lowest rank positions. Okay, so that's our discourse community, meaning that we have expected audience or readers of our writing. Okay, so and when we say business writing, it is also a class of communicative event, which actually means that language used in this context is considered as a form of social behavior. To explain it simply, it means genre. Okay, this is a particular genre, no, where there is an expectation in the way we write or in our writing, in order to meet the needs and interests of the audience or the people or the reader, whoever reads. And as regards the linguistic foundations, we can actually trace business writing into the systemic functional linguistics and English for specific purposes. When we say systemic functional linguistics, ang ibig sabihin po niyan is how people actually use the language in the actual communication. In this case, we may refer to business writing. Okay? So, yun po ang ibig sabihin ng systemic functional linguistics. Meaning, this is descriptive in nature, meaning that we allow the language to to move or to be used naturally by the people. So meaning we allow some changes in the grammatical features, and that we allow that in this particular discourse community. Say for example, um, uh, the utilization of grammatical features that are uniquely Filipino is now becoming prevalent in so many business writing in the Philippines. Okay, yung prevalence, and studies actually show and can prove that. For example, in one of the communication, I was able to notice some grammatical features that are uniquely Filipino. For example, the phrasal verb fill up the form or fill up the Google form. So when we say fill up, that actually is not a feature of American English. Actually is not a feature of American English. Feature is actually you can actually or we can find it mostly. We can find that feature mostly in the writings of Filipinos or in the utterances of Filipino speakers. So we usually say fill up the form, and I can see that feature in the Philippine context, and that's what actually what I actually meant earlier by the systemic functional linguistic. Okay, so meaning that this discourse community actually prescriptive in nature. I mean, that we allow may not. So that goes now to my second point, the English for specific purposes, which is actually prescriptive in nature. So we have to understand that as regards the linguistics foundations of business writing, there are two approaches in which people treat language in business writing. Okay, again, there are two approaches in which we treat language in business writing. So for others, okay lang yung mga ganong features, features that are uniquely Filipino. But for others, no, hindi sila papayag, no, or they won't allow such, no. They would always subscribe to American English variety, which they consider as standard English. But that notion actually has already been debunked in the scholarship or in the scholarly community. Okay, so okay lang sa iba na gumamit ng fill up, pero sa iba dapat fill out talaga, fill out the form. So if you would ask me which is correct, I would say both are correct. It depends on what approach are you using in writing and how you treat language in this particular context. Okay, but let us always remember, whatever our intention or whatever approach we're using in the way we treat language in business writing, we should always remember that the goal is always understanding, meaning that our goal is that the audience or the readers who are reading our writing will be able to understand what we are trying to convey. That's, I guess, the most important. So if the grammatical features, the vocabulary that you're using in the business writing don't actually have global effect, or meaning there's no effect in meaning, so I think there's nothing wrong with using features that are uniquely Filipino in business writing. And I can actually see that this is an acceptable, acceptable phenomenon in the context of Philippines. Okay, so next slide, sir. So so allow me to introduce to you the business writing purpose. So we have to understand that there are several, or there are so many purposes of when we write business writing. By the way, when we say business writing, we can actually refer this to our letters, memorandums, etc. Okay, so the purpose include, or the purposes include, to apply. So for example, when you are applying for a job, so the purpose of your business writing or your writing is to apply. Okay, so others would be to inquire, to respond, to request, to invite, to express intention or interest. And then we have to inform or to require. So you can see I have divided the purposes into two. The upper part are typically, or can typically be seen in letter writings, no. But the two purposes below can be typically seen in memorandum. So when we write, for example, memos or memorandum, the purpose usually is to inform. So when we do announcement of any activity, so basically we inform them. And sometimes we require, when we do memorandum, we require the people, we require the employees, we require our colleagues to attend to something or to whatever. So basically, these are the purpose or purposes for business writing. Okay, so when you apply for a job, so you write a letter. When you inquire, you also write a letter or an email, etc. Okay, so now we proceed to the next slide. So allow me to share to you 8 strategies for you to be effective in business writing, or effective in written or writing communication. Okay. So first is that we have to understand the nature of business writing. Second, be conversational but professional. Third, choose bias-free language. And then fourth, know when to use the direct and indirect strategies. Fifth, avoid the 4 common sentence faults. Sixth, use active and passive voice or voices rather. Seventh, use transitional expressions to build coherence. And eighth, okay, now we discuss number one in the next, the nature of business writing. Now we proceed to the next slide, sir. Okay, when we mean by understand the nature of business writing, I was saying earlier that it is an expectation write our ideas, our thoughts in writing. So here are 6 characteristics that you can employ in order for you to better understand the nature of business writing, and in order for you to be effective in written on or on business writing. First, we have characteristic number one: complete. So when we write a letter or a memorandum, it should be complete, meaning that there should be the addressee. You know who the addressee is, you know, the name of the event or the name of the addressee, the purpose of the event, the place, the date, the time, etc. So dapat kompleto siya. Okay, so this is one of the common problems that we encounter, especially now that we are in the pandemic, because most invitations are done online. So when we receive, for example, communication from outside organization, they don't usually include complete information. For example, the platform, okay, the date, okay, whether it would be in the afternoon or in the morning, etc. So that is usually what's happening, no, in communication. And even face to face, one time I was invited to attend a seminar, and the location where the event will happen, would happen rather, is so big that they did not specify really or make the details complete. So when I went there, I didn't know where to go kasi napakalaki ng venue, because in their communication they did not um, specify, no, the exact venue in that particular place where the event would happen. So it should be complete so that the people who are reading the letter or your communication would be well informed about the event or whatever you're trying to inform them. And the next characteristic would be correct. Of course, it's useless if the information that you have in your communication is complete. If the information that you have provided is not correct. Kompleto nga, pero hindi naman tama yung iba doon. So we have to be very careful when we write, making sure that while all information are provided, let us make sure that all are correct as well. And then we have to be very concrete. When we say concrete, we have to be very specific in our writing. You specify. Okay, so instead of saying, for example, any attire, why not saying casual attire? Okay, or whatever attire, semi-formal attire, formal attire, etc. You have to be very specific. Kasi for example, when you just say any attire, pwede short pan lang, okay? So pwede din bang t-shirt lang? And then when the people arrive there at the venue, magrereklamo yung organizers kasi bakit naka-t-shirt lang, bakit naka-shorts lang? Eh kasi sabi nga any attire. So you have to be very specific when you write. Okay, and then you have to be concise. When you say concise, meaning you have to be brief. Okay? Dapat brief lang. Hindi mahaba masyado yung writing mo. Although we understand that there are communications, no, or business writings that have so many information therein. Okay, okay lang po yun. But the manner we construct the sentences should be concise or brief. So instead of saying due to the fact that pandemic, etc., why not say due to the pandemic? So you avoid unnecessary words, no, in the sentence construction, because when we write very long sentences,
the tendency is that the reader might forget important information in your writing kasi ben largo dito yung construction. So why not make it short, make it brief, okay? Be direct to the point, okay? And then make it clear. Meaning, when you say clear, make your writing or communication understandable even by those people in the lowest rank. Okay? So okay lang if you are writing, for example, the president, or you're writing, for example, the city mayor, the city administrator, or whoever, okay, whoever that person or individual is in the higher position. Kasi you would expect that that person or that people, those people would understand even deep words. No? Pero when we are actually in the organization, we should be um, uh, dynamic in our approach in writing, making sure that at least even the lowest rank individual, I mean, those individuals in the lowest rank would be able to understand what we're saying. So instead of saying convoluted, why don't you just say difficult, okay? So why make things difficult for people, no? When we can actually make it simple to them, or even simpler, no? If it's already simple. So while it's allowed to use non-familiar words in business writing, but we don't encourage, especially when we're catering to a large audience where um, the audience are of different groups, of different ranks, of different educational background, etc. So in that case, we have to be very careful when we write. We have to be understandable. Because remember, the goal of our writing is not to impress, but to express, to make them understand. And it is the writer's job to make sure that the reader would understand what you're conveying. And then 6 characteristic would be courteous. Of course, with all those information that you have, always remember that be courteous, no, in your writing. Okay, so instead of saying your proposal is rejected, why not say we find your project proposal interesting, but we regret to inform you that it does not fit to the scope. So as when we compare the two, we can see that the second one is courteous, while the other one is it's too harsh, no, to accept, no, or to read. So, sir, are you saying that it's okay to write long? You said earlier that we should be concise. No, that doesn't break the characteristic of conciseness. Okay, because remember, those information are important as compared with that one, due to the fact that you can see that the fact that you can see that these 3 words are not really important, no? So you can actually remove them. But in that particular example, on the part of courteous, we can say that those information are important in our writing in order for us to express courtesy in our writing. Okay, so next, sir. So that's those were the examples or characteristics that we need to get to know in order for us to be effective in business writing. And here are another example for conciseness. If you want to, you can always refer this. Okay, so instead of saying as a general rule, so too wordy, why don't you just say generally, and then and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's for item number 1. Now we proceed to second. Be conversational, but at the same time professional. Okay, so when you say conversational, it's as if you're just talking to the people, you're talking to the individuals, you're talking to the person face to face. So remember, when you write a letter, always set your mood that you are talking to someone. Okay, so that when you write, you're making sure that it's just accommodating. The way you communicate with people is accommodating. but still there is an establishment of professionality, meaning that you still establish professionalism, no, in the way you write. So for example, for unprofessional, um, this report is totally bogus, show me the real data. So you see, when you try to get it, no, when you try to understand, it's very harsh, no. But if you are professional, you would actually say it this way. Kindly submit the source statistics because the figures in this report seem inaccurate. Okay. So, and then on the second example below, we can see that for overly formal and conversational. So avoid also to be overly formal in writing. Although I'm not saying that it's not allowed. Okay, it's allowed. No, if you want to. Again, it depends on how we treat in our approach. No, in writing. No, so for overly formal, for example, um, even some even would use these expressions, no, pertaining to your request, we must verify the data that your organization requires prior to consignment with our shipper. So that's overly formal. If you want to make it just conversational, so you can actually just say, we will send you your request as soon as we confirm the data you need. Okay, so that's just an example. Okay, that we how we can actually make our writing conversational in such a way that it will not sound too formal for the readers to read or to understand. Okay, so that's a basic rule. But then again, I as I have said earlier, I'm not saying that it's not allowed. It may be allowed, but if you want to be effective, we're talking here about being effective in written communication. So if we want to be effective in this endeavor, in this writing, in our writing, so we can actually prefer to be conversational, but at the same time professional, rather than unprofessional and overly formal. Okay, now next, choose bias-free language. Okay, especially nowadays, no, even the American Psychological Association actually encourages the writers, even in the scholarly discourse, to employ the epicene pronouns, no, which actually be what we call that, the generic. I mean the third plural pronoun as singular, meaning, for example, when you say um, Maria um, is a teacher, example lang, Maria is a teacher, they live in Canelar. So, in the traditional theoretical underpinnings, we would say that that is incorrect. Okay, that's not acceptable. That's a grammatical revolution, no? Uh, being now done by the American Psychological Association, encouraging scholars to employ such technique in writing in order to avoid biased language, no, or words. So you see, Maria is a teacher. They live. So it's very hard, especially for native speakers, for for or prescriptivists, no, to employ such, knowing that they is actually a third plural pronoun. Okay, usually we use she. Maria is a teacher. She lives in Canelar. So AP would encourage not to use she, instead they. Okay, to avoid bias-free language. But I don't know if all scholars have accepted already that recommendation. Okay, but that's now the revolution that APA is doing in their latest manual. Okay, so but then again, I'm not saying that you're going to accept that. It's up to you. It depends on you. Okay, but here are other examples that we can actually subscribe to. Okay, so for example, we have the biased words there. For example, executives and their wives. So instead of saying wives, we can actually say executives and their spouses. Okay, instead of saying waiter or waitress, why not say server? Okay, instead of saying Jose, Ayakan applied for. So why not just remove that part, no, and just say, I mean, why not remove that ethnicity, no, and just say Jose applied for the position, etc. Okay, so instead of really specifying, which may actually lead to racism, okay, in the decision making. So something like that. Old people are not allowed. So instead of saying old people, we may actually say people over 65 or 60 years old. Pwede ganon, it depends. Okay, so choose bias-free language. In order for us also to be politically correct in our utterances, meaning that in order for us to avoid offending other people with the languages that we have. Okay, so choose bias-free language, and there can be so many examples other than this. Next, number 4, we have know when to use the direct and indirect strategies. Okay, so we have direct and indirect strategies. We can actually employ both strategies depending on the situation, depending on the cases. Okay, but allow me to share something. So when we use direct method, it actually saves the reader's time. It sets a proper frame of mind, and it prevents frustration. Okay, for indirect method or strategy, it respects the feelings of the audience. It encourages a fair hearing. It minimizes a negative reaction. So again, we can actually use both depending on the situation or depending on the context. So now we proceed to the next. We will see some examples here. Okay, we use direct strategy if you think, okay, if you think that the audience is pleased, okay, or if you think the audience is mildly interested, and if you think the audience or the reader is neutral. So you can actually use direct strategy. But if you think the audience is or the reader or readers are unwilling or uninterested, if the audience pleased or disappointed, or if the employ indirect strategy. Now we proceed to the next to see some examples. Okay, so for example, in memorandum, usually kasi may, so for example, in the memorandum, you would usually notice it's direct. The method is direct. Walang paligoy-ligoy. Diretso agad. You are hereby directed to attend the meeting regarding the proposed budget for the year 2025. So in the presentation letter, you can see that some writers would employ direct strategy. But if you want to be effective, you can actually employ indirect strategy. So instead of saying, I would like, you can actually use direct strategy. So instead of saying, I would like, you already express your intention. Why not make an introductory remark or remark rather, introductory sentence first before proceeding to your intention? So by saying, for example, after many years of working directly with people in the academe, I am seeking to broaden my experience in another institution that will consummate my qualifications. As such, I am excited to endeavor a job opportunity in your office as an administrative aide, and would very much like to be considered as a strong candidate. So this is an indirect strategy. And you are not actually breaking the rule of conciseness in such case, okay? Because those informations are important, okay? The rule of conciseness, by the way, is that to not anymore include information that are no longer important. So that's the principle of conciseness. But if you think such information is important in your expression of writing of ideas or of your thoughts, then so be it. It's allowed. And in that case, you're also becoming effective in your writing. Okay, so in memorandum, usually you don't apply indirect strategy. You have to be direct lang, no? Just inform what, when, where, etc. Okay. So again, know when to use the direct and indirect strategies, and these are just some examples of so many examples out there. So you have to understand what are you writing, okay, in order for you to know what approach or which approach you will employ. Okay, kung application or letter of request, okay, so perhaps you can employ indirect strategies in such case, no? And for example, if you are terminating an employee, example lang, so usually indirect strategy, no? Mahirap naman yung direct strategy. You're fired, di ba? Ang sakit naman nun. So you may actually employ indirect strategies, no? I mean indirect strategy in that writing. No? So you have to evaluate. You have to assess your writing. You have to assess your intention. You have to assess what you're doing in order for you to be effective. No, in order for you to identify which of these two strategies you will employ. Okay, so next, sir. Avoid the four common sentence faults. These sentence faults are common in so I can see, no, and of course I don't like to make use of those examples here, but I have so many there are so many letters I have encountered, no, that commit these four common sentence faults. So that's why I'd like to share this to you for you to be aware of this, no, and for you to avoid these faults. So first is what we call parallelism. When we write, we need to be parallel in our structure. Okay, meaning, for example, we have to be parallel with our word class, the word class of the verb. I mean, the word class that actually connects ideas, no, or that actually make your ideas parallel, no. So, for example, in this case, we have not parallel or non-parallel sentence. The aims of this proposal are to increase productivity, reduce cost, and improving the quality of the product. So you can see it's not parallel. You would observe the word class, the verb, that underlined words are actually verbs. No? But you can see the word increase is actually infinitive verb. The word reduce is infinitive verb, but the word improving is not anymore infinitive verb. It's already a gerund or what we call verbal noun. Okay? So we see it's not consistent. It's not parallel. So avoid this sentence fault, no? So we can actually say the aims of this proposal are to increase productivity, reduce cost, and improve the quality of the product. So not improving. So we have to be consistent. If we use, for example, infinitive, so infinitive. If verbal noun, so verbal noun to be parallel. Okay. So next, okay, sentence fragment. Avoid also sentence fragment. When you say sentence fragment, you are separating the dependent clause from the independent clause, which is supposed to be connected in the independent clause. Okay, so the dependent clause is supposed to be connected in the dependent clause, but I have encountered in so many letters that it's usually separated. No, it's separated from the independent clause. So you can see that in the fragment column, there are two sentences there. one is the independent clause. The first sentence is what we call the independent clause. When we say independent clause, the sentence can stand alone. The other one is what we call the dependent clause, meaning that it cannot stand alone because it does not have a subject, or yeah, it does not have a subject. Okay, so it does not make sense. No, the sentence is not complete. That's why it's dependent. So you can see here the example. The said tools will be utilized for the assessment of the cadet students' performance. Period. While on seagoing service in compliance with the requirements of the CHED. So you see, the dependent clause is very hard to understand. No? It's very hanging. So you avoid this kind of fault. No, you connect the dependent clause to the dependent clause. So the dependent clause will be utilized to the independent clause rather. So instead of saying will be utilized for the while on seagoing service in compliance with the requirements of the CHED, or Commission on Higher Education. So you see, avoid such things, yung sentence fragment. You always have to determine which is the subject and next slide, sir. Okay, avoid run-on sentence or sentences. Avoid run-on sentences. When you say in one sentence, there are two independent clauses. Okay, meaning dalawang sentences that can stand alone pero pinagsama. Okay, so you avoid run-on sentences. For example, the CHED enjoins all faculty 7 founding anniversary 2021. So you see, the event will be on February 18, 2021 is an independent clause. The CHED enjoins faculty until founding anniversary is another independent clause. So two independent clauses are joined together without using punctuation marks. So that is a no-no. No? That may be confusing or hard to understand on the part of the reader. So avoid run-on sentences in our writing. We have to be aware of the subject and the predicate. No? So in this case, if there are two independent clauses, we can actually separate them using punctuation marks. Or you can actually connect them using conjunction. Okay, making the other independent clause a dependent clause, and then connect it to the independent clause. So for example, the CHED enjoins all faculty to participate in the virtual 27th founding anniversary, which will be held on. So the word which is used in this case. Okay, you can actually use period. Okay, or you can actually use which will be held on February 18 via Zoom and Facebook live stream. So, pwede pong ganun. You can use conjunction or punctuation marks to separate or to combine the two clauses. So, avoid sentence or run-on sentences. Next, comma splice. Okay, this is common in so many writings I've encountered, no, written by professionals already. And of course, I'm not blaming them, no. In fact, no, whenever I encounter such, I always teach them the right thing to do, no, in order for them to be effective in their writing. So instead of really criticizing them, expecting that, oh, you're already professional, you should have written this way, that way, so on and so forth. So instead of doing that, why don't we just help them by raising awareness, by making them understand that this is supposed to be how you're going to write it, because business writing is genre based and there's an expectation in how we should write, you know, our communication, etc. So comma splice. avoid comma splice. Here, the two independent clauses are separated by wrong punctuation mark, which is comma. Okay, you can see there's a comma here. So the two independent clauses are separated using comma. That's a wrong punctuation mark. Okay. So, for example, a schedule of meeting is set on December 13, 2021. That's an independent clause which, which can stand alone. And another independent clause, you are hereby directed to submit to this office. Okay, so that's another independent clause. So the punctuation mark used in this case is wrong. Okay, so you can actually use semicolon or period. Okay, period or semicolon. So for example, a schedule of meeting is set on December 13, hence, semicolon and then hence, you are hereby directed to submit to this office your proposals, etc. So, yun, no, mali lang paggamit ng comma. And this is really common in many communication, in business writing. Okay, and I have personally observed that. And even research shows, no, if you would notice that's one common errors that Filipino speakers commit, no, in their writing. Okay, so next, use active and passive voice. So it depends, no. Again, it depends on your in on which you are or you would like to emphasize. Okay, but the common use of active voice is to establish directness of message, to establish clarity, and to show vigor. For passive voice, its functions include to emphasize an action or the recipient of the action, to de-emphasize negative news, to conceal the doer of an action. So when we say active and passive voice, for active voice, it's the doer of the action is the subject of the sentence, but for the passive voice, the doer of the action is not the subject of the sentence. Again, for active voice, the doer of the action is not the subject. For passive voice, the doer of the action is baliktad. For active, the doer of the action is the subject. But for passive, the doer of the action is not the subject of the sentence. Now we proceed to the next slide to see an example. So you can see here in the active voice, you can see that the doer of the action invite. The action word here is invite. Okay, invite. That's the action word. So the doer of the action is the subject of the sentence. So who is inviting? The city government of Zamboanga invites all employees to attend the Zamboanga Hermosa Festival program. So you see the doer of the action is the subject of the sentence. On the other hand, passive voice, the doer of the action word again is invite, is not the subject of the sentence. For example, all employees are invited to attend the Zamboanga Hermosa Festival program. So you see, you cannot see in the sentence the doer of the action. Wala dyan. It's missing, no? Kasi, as what I said earlier, if you want to emphasize the doer of the action, then use active voice. If you do not want them to emphasize kasi hindi naman importante, so you can actually, if you want to emphasize, no, yung employees, for example, in this case, so you can actually make them the subject of the sentence by using the passive voice. Okay, so all employees, so meaning you are emphasizing here that all employees are invited to attend the Zamboanga Hermosa Festival program. Not just few, not just selected, but all employees. So you emphasize the all employees here. Okay? But if you want to emphasize who is inviting us, so you can use the active voice. Again, there's nothing wrong if you use the active voice or the passive voice. It's for whichever you want to emphasize in such case. So, depende kung ano yung gusto mong iparating talaga sa kanila. So know how also to use active and passive voices of the verbs. Okay, so that's the sixth strategy. The seventh, use transitional expressions to build coherence. Okay, so you can actually use transitional expressions para ma-connect yung idea from situation to, okay, so if you want, for example, to ideas, you can say additionally, or also you can show time. You can actually say, by doing that, you're actually emphasizing something. Okay, so I would like to share three things. First, so yun yung mga transitional expressions. Second, for instance, so you usually hear that to me in my speaking. For instance, for example, to something. This means, or that is, or to put another way, or in other words, so to clarify something, okay? To show cause and effect, you can say accordingly or consequently, or for this reason, or you can say hence or so. If you want to make contradiction, you can use actually or however or but or instead or rather or still, etc. If you want to compare, or I mean to contrast, no, to make differences. Okay, so you can use the expressions as opposed to, or at the same time, or by contrast, on the contrary, or available online, or in grammar books or in English books. So you can use transitional expressions to build coherence. Okay, to connect the ideas. Next slide, sir. Okay, establish connection with other communication. Okay, how? By referencing. Okay, for example, referencing. So you are establishing connection, you're writing with other communication, on whatever communication it is. Okay, so by referencing, or okay, say the statement, this has reference to your letter regarding your request, regarding whatever. Okay, so you are making a reference, no? You are referring your letter to a communication. Okay, so that's also one way for you to establish connection and to be effective in your writing. You make a connection para yung magbabasa nun, okay, yun pala yung pinopoint out niya, yung letter ko before, or yung letter ko about this, about that. Okay, so when you are referring your writing to another writing, you're making your communication or writing very clear to him, easily determined, easily followed. Malalaman agad, okay, sinabi pala doon. Okay. Or by showing compliance. You can establish connection with other communications by showing compliance, especially when you are writing a memorandum. Ito, uso to sa mga memorandum, advisory. When you're writing an advisory, when you're writing, for example, advisory na, tama na, memorandum and advisory. So, for example, you say, in compliance with the IATF guidelines, all employees are requested to. So, to do what? Okay, so you're establishing connection with other communication. The memo that you're writing is connected with or supported with or compliant with. Okay, so ganun po. You can establish connection with other communication. Okay? So that's how you are going to make your writing easily comprehensible, accommodating to the readers. Okay, so those are the 8 strategies which I really like to share to you, and I hope you learn something. And aside from those, let us always remember to, next slide, sir, review our writing, revise, and rewrite. Okay, so that's how we become effective in our writing. Always review our writing, look for something that is inconsistent, correct all those things, and then revise it, or rewrite. Okay, rewrite meaning you have to do major refocus of your writing, major um, changes in your writing. Okay, so you always review, revise, and rewrite. So those actually the 8 strategies again that I wish you will be helpful in developing or improving your writing, specifically in business writing, in order for you to be effective as communicator, as writer of your workplace. So thank you so much for again devoting your time to this.